Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story. And I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
Well, that almost worked as a great transition. Hey, Internet, my name is Jonathan Fisk, and I am here to rescue you. You have found the Mount Christian YouTube channel. Jesus has risen. You are paid for. He won't be long now. You are immortal. Anyway, the water seals it. The food feeds it. This is Christianity. You should join us. And this is election night. Oh, my goodness. What are we even to make of it? Hold on. I even have like a graphic. I made a graphic. Where's my graphic? That's not my graphic. There's my graphic. I don't know. It's there. I'll find it. No, I won't. There was a graphic to make you feel like it was election night. So what we're going to do instead is talk about why I think this is important as we wait for friends and family to be hanging out. I got a lot of people calling me tonight. We're just going to bring them in when they show up. We're going to talk about whatever's on their mind and how it relates to whatever news is on your mind. There's a party in the Discord. You can find that in the YouTube below, I think, or someone will talk to you in the comments on the side. But the Discord party is really where it's at. Of course, YouTube comments, nothing wrong with that at all. And the real idea is to try to survive the evening of white noise, chaos, matrix, fear-mongering nonsense with the certainty that life will go on, even should the empire fall, depending on, how you view the empire and all that kind of stuff. So G.K. Chesterton, who is this guy? He's a Roman Catholic thinker, a friend of C.S. Lewis, probably the reason C.S. Lewis is a Christian. If you've never heard of Chesterton, you should check him out. If you've never read Chesterton, you should check out his Twitter feed at least. I think they're on Recycle, but they're pretty good. I retweet him regularly, and of course today this came out, 51 minutes ago, maybe a little longer than that. But for my feed, it was, 4 hours ago? And what does he say here? He says, I never discuss anything except politics and religion. There is nothing else to discuss. And you can see him being, a bit of a jovial snark at this idea that you shouldn't discuss religion or politics in polite company because that gets in the way of polite company. Now, I think maybe we are at a time in history where we realize that silence does not beget love, right? Silence does not grow us in understanding of the person who's different than us. Silence does not teach us how to reconcile with each other. So at some point, you must talk about the gods, and you must talk about the city you live in. Otherwise, evil men are just going to run the city, right? And I'm not here to promote anybody tonight, particularly other than Jesus Christ, yeah? And at the same time, I live in this country just like you, so I want to have discussion. I want to have the freedom as a Christian, as a Lutheran, and as a pastor to have civil discourse about the things that certainly do impact not only me, us, but my children, my progeny, my hope for them and their faithful walking according to the Word of God for the rest of their lives. Those things matter. In my locality, where they're trying to amend the Constitution to allow like a progressive tax they never have to ask you about again, that matters, right? So the golden night's just to hang out, talk about stuff. Whatever's going on in the chat, I can't be responsible for. Whatever goes on when other people come on, they're responsible for their own comments, right? Another part of the future is we've got to realize if you're on the internet and talking to people and someone comes in and being a jerk, you have to ignore them. The answer is not to flame out Snowflake and cancel them. The answer is to ignore them out of existence. The more you just don't let them be acknowledged, the more the troll really doesn't want to throw its stuff at you anymore, right? And that kind of behavior will strengthen us. The ability to be stronger than an argument you disagree with. You don't have to have it be silenced. If some of us could take that attitude to the internet, we spend less time on the internet, right? Take that attitude to our lives, we get a little further in discussions with our friends and neighbors about everything from the resurrection of Jesus to the ascendancy of somebody, right? Somebody. All right, we have to talk about the city. Politics. From the Greek polis. You get the word police out of this too, eventually, the defenders of the city. Christians, you have no choice but to talk about politics because you must talk about your city. Now, if all politics means to you is two-party system all the way at the top and they're arguing over global standards, well, you're not really aware of politics then, are you? You don't really know how anything works, how the water gets to you, how the electricity grids run, all that, how the school systems work, who chooses which the bus drivers and what buses are going to do. That's called politics. That's called taking care of your city. And anybody who's not involved in that is just lazy, honestly. You're just going to get, the democracy you didn't pay for, right? The one you got voted out of is what you're going to get with that. So I think you have to talk about these things, and you have to do it from the perspective of your religion. You have to be able to be the Christian you are, which means that don't kill means don't kill, right? Murder being the thing we're talking about. It means that no adultery means no adultery, means no stealing means no stealing, means no lying means no lying. And that's going to apply when you vote on laws, when you vote on persons. Yeah, it might impact you. If somebody's a real jerk, has a lot of a crass and a demeaning attitude, that might indeed impact the way you vote. But then again, so might also the selling of baby parts and embryos and all this kind of stuff, or all manner of what's it not, behind backroom deals of what, deep state? I don't know. Margaret Sanger, at the very least, having a long and storied tradition of despising certain areas and ethnicities in the country and trying to see them killed through abortion. That's out there, right? You got to talk about that at a certain point, and you got to tell your brothers and sisters about this as a reality. This is the planet we live in. We have blood guilt on us as a nation. I've been overwhelmed as I've been studying. Here comes Flammy. I've been overwhelmed as I've been studying the Old Testament this year, this idea of blood guilt and how the people were so aware, even the pagans were aware of innocent blood and what it could do to you. Hey, Brian Flammy, you are absolutely on and on and on. First one to join, first one to hang out. How you doing, man?
Hey, pretty good. Trying to see what's happening so far with the returns. And this is great. Apparently, all the Republicans go to vote early. So what that means is you have all these red states.
There's only like three of them though right now, right?
Indiana, Kentucky, Florida, New Hampshire.
Ooh, that's a few more than I had seen.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting.
Well, is it because mine are showing that there's a very small amount of actual expected vote in. So like Virginia, I'm looking at Politico right now. Virginia says 53% Trump, 46% Biden, 1% of expected vote, right? Kentucky, is that called already? No. Why is there, that one's like solid though. Do you see that?
My Kentucky says what, 164,488. So 52% to 46%, 147, 186 for Joe Biden. Yeah, it's really close.
But there's only 16% of the vote in there for me. What I'm trying to figure out, hold on. I'll see if I can you, I don't know if you'll be able to see my stuff. You won't be able to see it. That's unfortunate. If everybody else will be able to see my screen when I go here. And Kentucky is solid, and there's a check mark by it, but it's only 16% in. So this shows you how little I know about this kind of politics and why you're not here to get this from me. What I see, though, that makes me excited, Flammy, is that, yeah, Republicans are voting. Okay, what does that mean? Why do we care?
One of the things I've been paying attention to up until this point is a lot of the popular media coverage. Like, I'm getting my return results here from Reuters, And it was also on Reuters that they had a couple of stories out today and yesterday where they were talking about how the polling was so strongly in favor of Joe Biden that it was influencing the stock market. And and this bump in the stock market, everybody's portfolios are doing a little bit better today than they were yesterday.
Right.
Has to do with everybody expecting, just by a landslide, Joe Biden throwing over Trump. But you know how these things go. The way the night starts is not necessarily how the night ends. It is so early.
It is. I have no idea what any of this means, honestly. If I recall, every year, like, you have a couple of states very early that are just Republican states, right? They are red states every year, and they just call early, and that's it. I'm seeing Vermont as a solid blue right now, also with a 29 electoral votes. I don't even get this though. This map doesn't make sense. So 0% of anything's been counted, but they've called it. Okay. Again, this is not why we're here at the moment in my mind, because that's when Mark Hemingway shows up later. He's going to be the one who clarifies all of this for us. Yeah. We're here to more discuss. Why does this matter to you, Flammy? Where are you? You're in Arizona?
I am in New Mexico.
That's right, New Mexico, Roswell. I knew that. Why does this matter to you? Why does this election matter? And locally, why does it matter? I mean, I said a few moments before you got on. For me, one of the biggest things today, maybe, is the vote no on a constitutional amendment to the Constitution of Illinois. That's a big deal for us here. So what's going on like that in your neck of the woods in Roswell?
Well, New Mexico is kind of in a strange position. It's a blue state. It's Democratic, but only because the two big urban centers, and increasingly the three urban centers, which would be Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and Las Cruces, have an urban voting demographic, which just leans liberal and progressive.
Always does.
Out where I live, though, in Roswell, we are 3 hours away from any other town of size and resources and facilities. And it's deeply conservative out here. I mean, and so it's part of the frustration of rural America, at least where I live, that you live in a state where it's politically, according to policy, very different from how the people think and act and speak. And one of the things that matters to us in New Mexico, especially in a place like Roswell, are the lives of the unborn babies, and it's been very difficult to advocate for those in a state as blue as ours. That the voting populations in Santa Fe and Albuquerque really make it easy, for women who have been deceived into desiring abortion to obtain that. And so especially here in our rural neck of the woods, we even don't even look at the federal so much as we look at the state. And even because the state is so different from how we are, a lot of our politics is local, which is very different from where I've grown up before. I've grown up in Indianapolis, Indiana. I spent some time in what other big cities around here? Like Orlando, Florida, Honolulu, Hawaii, San Diego, California. There's just around Chicagoland.
Can I interrupt? So do you think that this is, you're getting involved because it's like that where you are? I've been all over too, man. I lived all over this country, east, west, and central, and I've never gotten involved like I have this year in local politics, and it's led up to it this year, leading up to it, being concerned about it, figuring out who my sheriff is, figuring out who my congressman is, what they stand for, who's incumbent, all this. I never cared until this year. So is it just because of where I am, or is this something that a lot of us are reckoning with now? I forget who I was talking to earlier, and I don't think I'm going to be able to say it as well as I did earlier, but like, if we do not realize that we have a civic duty to take care of our country, we're not going to have a country. And there's a generation of us, I think, that we're just kind of waiting for someone to ask us to get involved, and maybe we're done waiting. Is that a way to look at it? I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe it's just that the federal politics are so crazy that
your only hope.
Yeah, that your only alternative is to look to the state and the local levels. And in fact, it's very helpful if you get to look your politicians in the eye to have a conversation with them. That's more of a natural political experience. The abstract federal hypercharged politics that we live through in the Twitter feed or on the major news networks, that is what feels to me to be artificial. And your involvement there, it may get you a part of the grand conversation, I suppose, but at the same time, your voice is not going to be nearly as important as it is at a local level. Right.
Yeah. Your local congressman particularly is going to appreciate you more than your national congressman or your senator. As much as the senator is going to be like, thank you for voting for me, right? He's not going to have the time for you that your local congressman is going to have. But when you talk about even Roswell, though, and maybe your local congressman's struggle as he then goes to the state Congress and doesn't really find any way to get traction for the needs of Roswell, dealing with this, blue state that is city run by places far away from you. The phrase taxation without representation has come into my mind often in my life since I was told that's not a problem here anymore since, 200 years ago. Apparently that all went away. More and more I have thought, that really is exactly what we have here. We have people far away ruling people who have completely different lives than them. A Brief History of Power, the podcast I'm doing with Kuntz, we kind of deal with this in terms of class warfare and whatnot. But I'd be curious to hear your own take on that. I mean, is that what you see happening as well?
Oh, sure. If you have like a pretty homogenous rural community like Roswell, this no taxation without representation becomes not just a national conversation, or at the time of the American Revolution, an international conversation. It's even a local state conversation. It seems unfair, that the policies of a liberal government in Albuquerque and in Santa Fe should dictate to the rest of the state that shares, from their own perspective, none of the values of those who are governing. Case in point in how the COVID crisis has been handled here in New Mexico. The folks in Roswell are big on personal autonomy, that's part of the Western mindset out here, that my family deserves to have our own land holding, and on my land, it's my law, I get to decide how best to raise my children, which school to send them to, and what church to attend, and if I want to walk into this store or that store, if I want to do it with a mask or without a mask, it's up to me to decide. And so when some of the most strict mandates in the entire country came down on New Mexico, it was a bitter pill. It was a bitter pill for the rural folks out here to swallow. And honestly, when it came to a lot of the mandates and the orders, we've had local law enforcement say, well, yeah, that's the law, but we're not necessarily going to enforce it.
Right. Right.
And so
we've had that here as well, by the way.
Yeah.
Similar.
And so what's nice about that, though, is that life goes on. I've had a pretty normal experience over the past year, which I'm grateful for. And from time to time, when the state has been ordered to crack down on these Roswellians, the police have usually given the folks a heads up, saying, "Hey, we might be there in an hour, so just in case you folks want to leave your event or go away for a while."
But I mean, who wants to live in the time of Robin Hood? And that's the question, right? So someone's going to say, "Why are you Lutheran pastors talking about this stuff? You shouldn't talk about politics." And then it's like, wait, no, this Lutheran pastor is having his life and ministry challenged by the state government, so you have to be in a semi-clandestine relationship with your local nobles? I mean, this is like a weird thing, right?
It sounds Lutheran. Is what it
does a little bit. You're right. That's good. I was going to say there wasn't a class on this at seminary, but the Reformation history should have covered that. There was not a one-to-one application to American society back then, though, if I recall. They didn't foretell this. I see a little friend behind you there.
Yeah, there's Caleb. He escaped into the room. Yeah. He wants to hang out for a while.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, hopefully YouTube doesn't shut us down for that. They sometimes get freaked out about kids, but hopefully he'll just hide in the back. They're always worried about bad stuff. There's bad stuff on the internet, Nobody had laptops with that involved in it in the last couple of weeks that might impact today and the conversation. I want to get back to why and how much should a Lutheran pastor talk about this kind of stuff?
So as Christians, we have more than just a purely spiritual life, right? I mean, so I grew up with this mentality, and you can tell me if you had a similar experience, but in the Missouri Synod, there was this sort of separation between church issues and political issues. And in the church, you could hear about things like the forgiveness of sins and the Jesus and the Bible stories, right? And you could hear about sort of practical applications to your regular day-to-day life. But when it came to issues like abortion or the cultural shifts that were going on in society, even back in the 90s when I was growing up, those were considered to be somewhat taboo. The pastor who talked about that, at least in the congregations I had been a part of, the pastor who talked about those things was doing something that was in a lot of people's minds distasteful. That he didn't maintain this sort of polite distance between these two aspects of people's lives, the political and the spiritual. And thanks be to God, I think especially over the past 15, 20 years, our Missouri Synod has been much more vocal in saying that, no, as Christians, we have a duty to our neighbor to speak up for the lives of the unborn. We shouldn't be seen as nonpartisan in this. We should be seen as highly valuing these children in the wombs of the mothers is valuable in God's sight, and not just in God's sight. If it matters to God, it should matter to us as well.
Yeah, that's the issue. So go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, and so we've had to engage in conversations about natural law, of human dignity, And that's been, I think, really good for our synod. It's definitely shifted the stance at Fort Wayne, the seminary where I went to while I was there. They spoke out much more firmly by the time I left about things about like birth control. When I first got there, they said we no opinion. By the time I left, I remember being in a symposium with Dr. Gishin saying, we used to be neutral on this, but we were wrong. Now we have to speak against it because birth control represents an attack on God's creation and his gifts for men.
Can you elaborate on that just a touch, since that's a bit of a topic? I'm not in disagreement with you, but it's not one I've broached often on the channel. So just curious if you want to give a little elaboration there.
Yeah, so the idea there is that, during the sexual revolution of the 1960s and extended into the 1970s, and even till today, we're still living in the aftermath and the unfolding of that. You started to have this idea of sexual pleasure as something that should be enjoyed for its own sake. It became detached from the institution which God bound it in by the sixth commandment, which is marriage. And there, its purpose is not personal fulfillment or satisfaction. The purpose is for bearing and rearing children and for strengthening that marital bond, and it's for a family. And once you separate out one aspect of the commandment, that becomes an idol, and a destructive idol. It undermines creation as opposed to holding it up, which it would do if it remained within the bounds of the sixth commandment. And I think there's Wolfmuller. He can talk about this.
Yeah, he's hopping in. He's hopping in. So give me a sec. I'll bring him in here with us so he can join us in the chat. And we're talking about the challenge that the birth control movement brought upon civilization, particularly, and I'm going to summarize for Flammy here, detaching the body from the life in the sexual relationship of marriage, as if the body is just this thing you do stuff with, and then life is a different thing. You kind of do one with the one and one with the other. That impacts a lot of life, but Flammy was talking about how at the seminary, when you guys were there, maybe nobody would talk about this at all, and now these days, well, marriage is really on the forefront of people's minds. We can go that direction or anywhere else. He just left the camera, so I just took him off. It's you and me. What's up, Brian? How you doing?
Hey, guys. Which way do I need to go? So I came just at the right spot, huh? Shoot. Talk about birth control.
I know. Well, Flammy brought it up. And just for fun, here comes my wife.
Matter in the Missouri Synod or to Christians in general, and I mentioned abortion, and then we spiraled off into this. So, but since it's a difficult part, it's great that you're here. Thanks be to God for that.
There is something that I was thinking about this a lot with Corona, because technology can only create sterility, right? So you have this sort of technological advance of birth control, which is really, Al Mohler traces this back in his book. What is it? We Cannot Be Silent, and he traces the whole kind of beginning of the sexual revolution to the technological advances surrounding birth control. So
it does connect to that, because that was always the goal. The goal is it says it's to emancipate women, right? That's the goal. But really what it is to create the other half of the workforce's ability to leave the home and the farmstead and come into the factory. That's the real end of this, industrialization. So before we go too far on that, since the lady stepped in, let me introduce my wife, Meredith. I'm not sure you've ever been officially on video with me.
No.
Yeah, no. So say hi to Brian, and Brian, you can see them both there. And
hey, Meredith, good to see you.
Hi, it's good to see you guys too.
Hold that right there. You're sounding pretty good, but yours is good. Yeah, you're good. Right there. You're good.
Sharing a microphone.
Did you try to talk Jonathan out of this idea tonight, or?
No, I didn't. I know better than to do that. Oh, we are.
Dance.
Oh my goodness.
Why do you think this was a bad idea, Brian?
Well, it's yet to be seen.
Is yet to be seen. I think this has to be a good idea.
Wisdom
I'll tell you why.
Justified by her.
That's right. By her children.
Is justified by her children. Is that it? Yeah.
That's right.
So
Yeah,
that's what we're-
that's right. Wisdom is justified by our children, and the reason this is necessary is because it's like Flammy's frozen here on us. The reason this is necessary is because if they're not watching us talk about how these things are not ultimately important, but what the Scripture says is ultimately important, they're going to be watching other people who are going to talk about how these things are ultimately important when we know they're not. And so that's why I want you here, because you are. What would you say? You said crisis in the church is a sin. That was years ago you said that. Do you remember when you were talking about that in the
I do.
Steadfast stuff?
I do remember that.
So apply that a little bit here.
So that comes from, it was, so Luther used to quote Cicero, who would say that necessity knows no law. That's the idea of it. And so the idea is that when you have a normal ordering of the world, it's great. There's family and there's people who are helpful and everyone has their vocation. But if there's an emergency, then order breaks down. Immediately, order breaks down. And so there's no longer, here I'm sitting here with you, but if someone crashes into the tree in front of me, then suddenly I'm not a father and a husband. I'm a paramedic and a first responder. When there's a crisis, all sort of normal order breaks loose. And is it helpful to know if you want to destroy order, if you want to wreck order and vocation, then you just have to create a crisis. So the normal order of the church, for example, like just as an example, the liturgical ordering of the church has to, if you want to break that and do something new, then you just create a crisis. And so you have an evangelism crisis, the youth are leaving the church crisis, and then everyone's free to abandon the order that's there because of the crisis and so forth. So that's the way it works. And so remember Rahm Emanuel? Flammy knows who that is. I don't actually know who it is, but he said that never let a good crisis go to waste. That's how the politics sort of taps into that idea of crisis. And one of the ways we can resist it is by saying, if Jesus sits on the throne, then there's no emergencies. At least there's no theological emergencies. There's no whatever.
Well, that's where I'm with you. I mean, I love the phrase "never let a good crisis go to waste," because I want to use every crisis to tell people that it's not a crisis because Jesus Christ is on the throne. Yeah. Although I think Rahm Emanuel was not the first one to make that statement. Although maybe Fellamy wants to talk about Rahm Emanuel and South Chicago politics and how they've taken over everything everywhere. No, he's not up for that right now. No. So how about we just say hi to my wife and ask her, what's it been like watching the world the last 3.5 months as a mother? Well, 4.5 months. How long has it been since March? Golly, 5 months? 6?
Well, first I want to say hi, everybody who's out there saying hello to me on YouTube. It's really great to see you guys here. Without everyone watching, it's kind of no fun to have a party show. So it's good to see everybody. And Pastor Wolfmueller, what are you drinking?
Well, can you see the Texas cup?
Nice.
That's huge.
Everything's big in Texas.
That's right.
Okay,
so
that was it.
That was it. There we go. The talker's going to jump back in and play ping pong with everybody. What I want to ask you though, honey, if you would talk about it, because I tried at the dinner table generally to keep the conversation from bringing up names. I always wanted to have the political conversations be, okay, let's talk about the issue, let's talk about the idea, and try to avoid the orange man that makes all people yell about things. And gradually over time, I found you just saying, but, and you wanted to defend President Trump. And as the person who's supposedly the demographic that will never vote for this man, I'm curious if you would like to share what brought you to that conclusion. Because it certainly wasn't me telling you go vote for him, right? I don't think that happened. I mean, I did, but,
Well, first of all, why am I the demographic that won't ever vote for
The
him?
idea is that women will see him as crass, overriding, kind of a sexual predator, offensive. And so, the middle-class soccer mom, not that you're particularly a soccer mom, but the middle-class white educated woman is supposedly going to just find him so unappealing. That's the idea.
Okay.
I think, right? I mean, have you guys heard this, Brian or Brian?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yeah, they're nodding. There you go. Loud nods,
Okay,
everybody.
So
Yes.
For better or for worse, I like to listen to what people have to say and try to read between the lines of what they say. And I just couldn't get around what President Trump was saying and then what other people were saying about what he was saying. That's a lot of saying.
So give an example.
So, for example, we'll just go to something more recent, the debate night. I don't even know if I should bring it up.
No, yeah,
But
do, please. That's why we're
I
here.
didn't watch it. I just listened to Ben Shapiro's overview of it. And I was struck by, yes, both the men that were looking to be our leader were not chivalrous. They were not gentlemanly. They didn't use debate tactic. But I couldn't help but think that, I couldn't help but observe that President Trump likes to tell it like it is. And he took the opportunity to say, you know what, I've had to put up with a lot of whispering in my ear, and I'm not going to let you get away with it tonight. And so though he used a bad tactic, if you slow down and try to listen to what he was actually trying to say, he was kind of calling out the elephant in the room and not letting it just get overlooked.
So it sounds like you're making a distinction between his style and his substance a little bit.
Yeah. So I don't approve of his style, but
that reminds me of someone else I know you listen to, who I know Brian listens to, who is Al Mohler. And Al Mohler made a case for voting that involved the Christian conscience, which, did you listen to that on Monday, Brian? What did you think of that? Was it Monday, I think that came out?
I did.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe it, because I remember Al Mohler talking distinctly about, I think it was Tuesday, he endorsed Trump. And I remember him talking last time around how theologians and pastors ought to be able to endorse a person, but they ought not to. And he made that argument. And he'd also had said he didn't vote for President Trump in 2016, and he had made the statement. It was amazing. He says, I said that if I voted for President Trump, I'd have to publicly apologize to Bill Clinton. And he said, this year I am voting for Trump, and I am not apologizing to Bill Clinton. It was kind of an amazing sort of thing. I wasn't expecting it, but he came out. He came out with a strong endorsement. In fact, I think President Trump tweeted to Al Mohler. I saw that. President Trump tweeted, said, "Hey, thanks Al Mohler for the endorsement."
Right. And if I recall, getting back to kind of where we started with some of this, trying to get over here to Flammy, it was pro-life issues that really were the things that convinced Al Mohler to take this position. And what you were advocating right before Brian jumped in, everyone else came in, was that the reason why we can no longer be silent as Christians, as Lutherans, LCMS Lutherans, Catholic Christians, whatever, on political issues is because of the issue of abortion.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one, because we value the lives that God has created, and we have the fifth commandment to direct us in that direction. And the fifth commandment just doesn't apply to what I was talking about earlier, a purely spiritual sphere. Good thoughts aren't going to do it. We need to speak openly and without shame about the value of an infant's life. And increasingly, we're finding ourselves having to speak about the value of the elderly and those people who are seen to have little or limited utility in this society. And so this is a perfect opportunity for Christians to speak boldly about life and the value of that life, and to encourage our countrymen to vote for those candidates and for those policies that in a good society that gives everybody the chance to be born and to live, and for God to make the decision as to when a life should end or not.
Brian, Meredith? Yeah?
Yeah, so it's more about what comes with the person rather than just the person who holds the office.
Mm-hmm. I think that's right. Absolutely. I mean, so Donald Trump, I remember having a conversation with a good friend of mine at Hope Lutheran Church. We were talking about who to vote for. And even though I didn't like speaking from the pulpit, you shall vote for so-and-so or so-and-so, I had a pretty good relationship with this fellow, and I was convinced at that point that I was going to vote for Donald Trump, and it was a strange feeling because I knew he was a different kind of candidate than I've ever voted for before. And my friend said to me, "Well, I can't see it. I can't be convinced." And I said, "Well, think about it this way. Donald Trump has promised that he will appoint conservative judges to the Supreme Court who will look hard at the various legal decisions that have enabled access to abortion in our country right now." And I said, as a Christian, I can swallow the distasteful personality. Oh, great. On my Reuters map, Texas just turned blue. Wolfmueller, what are you doing down there?
Sorry. Let me go check. Let me look outside.
It's not there. It's not there on my political map yet, although Florida's looking blue right now. 50.3 to 48.9%. It's going to be probably close there all night. Pennsylvania is not reporting anything. I heard reports earlier today that Pennsylvania was having voting machine issues in various areas, and the Twitter sphere kind of piped up about that. I'm not really sure. New Hampshire, which earlier was leaning toward Trump, has now flipped to the blue. That just means some counties are coming in. Again, a lot of this is we're not even close to where this is really going to be, except for where they have called it. Kentucky is red, and West Virginia is red, and probably not any surprises there. But let's jump back to. I should have jumped to people could see my screen when I did that. But let's jump back to what you guys were talking about before that.
Yeah, so in my conversation, I told him, well, swallow the distasteful personality for the chance at getting those conservative judges appointed to help make a difference in the lives of many people. And I said that for too long, the liberal justices that we've had in this country have really legislated from the bench to push us in a direction that many of the citizens of this country never wanted to go. And Donald Trump could be a force for good in trying to change some of this. And so I convinced my friend, I think, and he told me he ended up voting for Trump. And I'm pleased to say over the past 4 years, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, but Trump has kept his promise.
He has. I saw a video of an African-American man, a black man, an immigrant, he said, 40 years, an immigrant, and he's just raving. I've never seen anything like it. He does what he says. I'm like, yes, it is. I'm younger than this guy by a lot. I certainly have not lived his life. He clearly lived a very challenging life compared to my own, and yet we both see the same thing. Here's a politician who, for all of his problems, and I'll just leave him at actual problems, he actually does what he says, and I'm not sure if that's, well, it seems to be breaking the system, but what system is it breaking? Is it breaking the post-World War II system of deep state? I'm a weirdo. Or is it breaking actual America, right? And some of my conversations with Kuhn's will show up later, he's concerned about America's ability to withstand this long term, that just societally we are going to fracture, that the melting pot is going to be more of a patchwork quilt like Canada by the time we're done. There's a lot of options there for you guys to jump in on whatever you want. That's probably way out of... Wolfman's like, where are we? What's going on? I need some Bible. Give me some Bible.
Well, one of the things I wrestle with, I mean, I don't think I've publicly discussed my own vote or ever, and here's the reason why is that I think there's a way that the fervor with which we hold an opinion ought to be related to the importance of that particular opinion. And in politics, that gets all out of whack. So just as an example, you might have someone who's they're utterly convinced politically, one way or another, progressive and liberal and democratic, or conservative and Republican, or what. They're very, very convinced about their political views. They're less convinced about their theological views or their views of the Bible.
Yeah.
And so there's a way and I've been thinking about that a lot. This is kind of a skewed topic about how, the way you vote, it just counts as a vote. It doesn't matter how much you care about it. Like I could be like, all right, I'll vote for this guy, and then someone else, their whole life is dependent on that guy, and it counts the same. So the fervor is not represented in the vote. But I worry that because people are so invested in their political opinions, and here we're talking political opinions, maybe not worldview thoughts and things like this, but political opinions, that you say who you voted, because you have this political opinion that I don't like. So I mean, I honestly really wrestle with that quite a bit. So you guys can...
I think that's been the wrestle the LCMS has had. That's exactly why our history has been checkered on this matter is we're not really sure who we are when we speak in this way. Brian, you look like you want to jump in. Flammy, you want to jump in.
I remember having this conversation with my congregation this past weekend and telling them that my job isn't to tell you who to vote for. All I can do is to encourage you to act upon what you've been taught according to the Ten Commandments when you deal with your neighbor in this world. You know, the Ten Commandments define love that's not just limited to the church, but love that we extend to even those people who aren't Christians, you know. And I mean, so I suppose in this setting, I'm probably a little more open about my political leanings, and I'm not ashamed about that. You know, if somebody asked me who'd you vote for, I don't think I'd have any particular shame to say this candidate or that candidate. You know, I do wonder about what Wolfmueller said. Yes, I think you're right that people could put too much importance on the political fervor or too much personal investment in it. And I wonder, like, is there some way to figure out a balance in that? I mean, is it in such a way that, you know, I'm comfortable in talking about these things politically, but when it comes to my own home, I don't reflect a lot of my political vitriol or conviction? I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I think it's a tricky thing, is that you want to have the right opinion, but you want to hold that opinion with the appropriate degree of, I don't know, intensity. It's one of the reasons why Hans is so funny. Our friend Hans, who's coming on later, right? Because he'll go on Twitter and give these like ridiculously strong opinions about things that don't matter. You know,
it's like the 3 songs from 1983, they're the best 3 songs ever wrote. I dare you to dispute me, right?
Right, that's right. And it's hilarious because he has this this fervor about the thing that does not matter. It's hilarious, and it is hilarious. But we're so tempted to do that, to kind of get carried away with our opinions. And I think more than anything else, just like money always tempts us to idolatry, politics tempts us to this sort of loss of proportion.
Mm. Yeah, and so this is, I think that's very good what you said. I mean, I even went so far as to say, like, how you vote today isn't going to matter much, and people like booed at me, and that's okay. And I said, because if we wanted the direction of the country,
how often do you get booed in the pulpit? I'm just wondering.
No, this is Bible study. Boos are more acceptable than Bible study. We all know that. So, I mean, so I said, if you want to change like the heart and the soul of this country, it's never going to be from the top down, government dictating to the rest of the country where we're going to be headed, right? The hard work has to be done in the 2 other estates, in the estate of the family and in the estate of the church. If those 2 estates are weak and lacking, then the heart and the soul of the government is going to be useless.
Yeah. I was thinking about that, which has me. So I've got a thing I've written down to try to meditate on further. But it's this old idea that that for the Christian, the solution is never the ballot box, but the baptismal font. I just said that right there better than I've been trying to figure out how to say that all week. That's how to say it. The baptismal font is more important than the voting ballot, because so you just figure if you got someone like Saul the Pharisee running around killing the Christians, and you think that then the Christians up there in Damascus are like, we need to pass a resolution that says that killing Christians is illegal. It's not going to stop him. You know, if he's going to kill the Christians, he's going to kill the Christians. So the solution is always. It's in Saul's conversion that now the Christian church is become safe, so that the Christian is most especially interested in the heart of their enemies, that they would, how do we pray it in the general prayer, that they would be one with us and rejoice in the Lord's truth together with us.
Yeah. I wonder about well, maybe we can rethink of our involvement in the political sphere in this way. I mean, why do we have synodical conventions when, in fact, we know that the synodical conventions don't have much to do with the day-to-day life of a parish. It's because this is a place where a public, open conversation can happen to help set the tone of where the real work is done in the parishes, And so, it's good to send your delegates to represent your circuit or whatever, and for them to come and report back. And for this conversation to happen creates unity among all of the churches. It's something that we do towards concord. And it also helps the individual congregations and families to say, well, these are probably the things we have to work on. If these are the particular challenges that are being met, not just by us, but by churches who are our brothers and neighbors in this country that we wouldn't otherwise know about. Maybe there's an analogy between that and how a Christian ought to consider their involvement in national government.
I think so too, especially because it forces us to the table where people disagree, which just doesn't hardly ever happen, and less now in kind of social media land. We're all divided up into our thing, and so it does force you back into the public square where you actually have to sort of face to face with the people who have different ideas and so forth, which is always going to be helpful.
Yeah, and that's exactly right, Brian. That's why I think talking like this, period, has to happen. I think that Christians, more than necessarily deciding who they're going to vote for by watching this show, need to see social media either as a platform to harmony or as a platform to get off of, and that we got to be in the business of what they used to call ecumenical work. I don't mean aligning political bodies in the churches, but I mean speaking into the darkness the single light of truth that we know is going to unite the ultimate tribes in Christianity. And Lutherans, we've carried this this nugget, this gospel, for very long. We've shouted it in certain ways, but I think in some ways we've guarded it for this time, for just this time. That it is to be unleashed upon the people, and that to see the platforms that we have both locally, politically, as a way to do that. So if your sheriff is going to your church, and he doesn't have to go out and be the Lutheran sheriff while he's sheriff, but if he's a man in the community who is impacting that community with a life of godliness that reflects the scriptures, then that's going to have an impact on the community, and Christians should do that, right, in some way, and that's local office. I don't see why national office would be any different. I have to say, again, I did not vote in the last election. I was not a never-Trumper, but I was almost a never-Trumper, and it just has continued to amaze me how I have been radicalized, I guess you could use the phrase, radicalized to put a Trump sign in my yard, and because of things like Vice President Pence's debate, in which he spoke as a Christian man. And it was evident that this Christian man has been working in politics for the good of humans for a long while. And I just don't see why Lutherans should be like, well, you shouldn't do that. That just doesn't sound like what we said in the 1500s when we were asking that question.
Yeah, the princes were supposed to be godly, right? We were supposed to pray for their faith. I made this point after I once visited England for a day. And I visited the one place I went to go visit was Westminster Abbey. And it was a Matins service, and I realized after we were praying for the Queen that every time the Britons would say "God save the Queen," what they were talking about is her eternal salvation, her Christian soul, because she's a better queen for the country when she's a Christian.
That's beautiful.
That's an explicit command of St. Paul that we would pray for the rulers. So this is not an option for the Christian. Do you want to pray for the person who's in charge? It's a command from the scriptures.
And that goes even if they're not a president and they're a wicked tyrant who is an evil king who's doing everything bad. Even if it's the Bishop of Rome himself, you are to pray for his salvation first, right? And then second, conversion for the good of all people. You got thoughts to throw in there, my friend? Want to jump in? You don't? I think you do. She has so many good thoughts, but she feels that she would impinge upon us theologians.
Steal the thunder. Meredith, go ahead. Steal the thunder.
I guess one thought I did have is how can you, I know you guys have been talking about praying for our leaders, but how... do you have any words of wisdom or spiritual fatherness that you can share for us when we don't appreciate what our president is doing?
Yeah, again, when we pray for our president and other elected officials and leaders, yeah, sometimes we're praying for them that they make good and godly decisions, and when they don't and they pursue ungodly courses of action, especially that affect us. I mean, I think that we pray against those things, right? And the key word here is that we pray that the Lord would turn their hearts. So often when it comes to the matter of the human heart, our estimations of our own abilities to shout at someone and to convince them are greatly exaggerated. But in fact, the subtle means and the effective means of prayer are much better at that, because God changes the heart. And so to acknowledge those things in prayer, to pray that the Lord would turn their hearts of our enemies, just like like Wolfmueller was saying in the old collects. That's the kind of language that they use.
I think Luther talks about this in the Large Catechism. Meredith is great. He says that every day we pray for daily bread, and the rulers should rule in such a way that prayer of the church is for them and not against them. So that their job is to help provide for our good, and that we would all have daily bread. And if the rulers are preventing the Lord's generous care for our bodies and everything else, then they find themselves on the wrong side of the Lord's prayer, and we're praying against them.
How's that working in New Mexico? How's that working in New Mexico? That's what I want to know.
I have to say that the prayers of the Christians have been answered at least where we live. I mean, think about it. Like here in Roswell, we are hearing all these things that come down from Santa Fe, the governor's frustration with these churches, and thanks be to God, I think according to our prayers and for at least the sake of the prayers of a few people, we've been able to continue to worship as our Lord has commanded us, without any worldly repercussions, other than just somebody in another place saying, "I'm displeased," and that's fine. I can live with that.
And there we go into the quiet nether, because I'm busy. I'm monitoring the chat. I'm monitoring the chat, and so I'm not ready to jump in like I should be.
I'm gonna have to go put some kids in bed and stuff. I'll try to come back later.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we'll say goodbye to. Hold on, let me get you just through the shot there, Flammy. Pastor Brian Flammy, tell us what congregation you're the pastor of out there.
In Roswell, New Mexico.
You got to say all that again.
Manual Lutheran Church in Roswell, New Mexico.
Manual Lutheran Church, Roswell, New Mexico. This is Flammy the Patriot. If you haven't seen his video from when he was first saying we will take the Lord's Supper no matter what the government says, you got to check that out on the channel. Otherwise, come back later if you can. We'll be here just chilling. That's that.
Flammy the Patriot.
That's what I called him in the video.
That nickname.
I made it up.
It's better than
cool,
Flambeau, right?
Flambeau. You said it out loud, so we can repeat it now? I asked him one time, hey, what did they call you in the military? He wouldn't tell me for 3 days. Hey, come on, tell me. And one day he says, Flambeau.
That's great. That's great, Flambeau.
I've regretted it ever since then.
We'll see you on the other side. I'm going to hop to the desktop here for just a second and push us over here. Let's see here. My picture is still taking too much of this, so you guys can't see the whole map. Give me 1 second. Oh, come now. Let us reason together, computer. And almost there. So many buttons.
Something fun to talk about while you're doing
While I'm doing all these things. All right, so this kind of lets you see a little bit of what the early results are. Again, you can't trust these things too much. Although when they call the whole state, I guess you can. So Vermont and Virginia already called for Biden, as I mentioned earlier. That's just part of Virginia right there, isn't it? Yeah, that's part of Virginia. West Virginia, Kentucky, look, they've been called for Trump. Otherwise, we just have a lot of reporting coming in. Florida looks tight, 49.9% to 49.3% with 80% of expected vote in. I wonder, do you remember, Brian, that hold on, I got to get back to the right program here. I think this has been the last two, if not the last 3 elections, like this one county in Florida is like the last place reporting every year, and they're like 4 days late. Do you know what I'm talking about? Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. Is that Miami-Dade? And that's where they had the hanging
sound.
chads?
That's not good. Brian, we lost your sound there.
Yeah?
Let's see here.
Test.
I got you muted.
Yeah? Can you hear me?
I don't got you muted. Now I got
That's
you.
where the
Brian,
hanging
you there?
chads were.
Nope. How did that happen?
I don't know.
We got
Can you
this
hear me?
going
I'm
on.
sending audio. I know that for sure.
Well then, let's see your Skype.
Okay, so should I tell everybody?
Yeah, you talk to somebody about something
What
right
we
now.
did today?
Yeah, why not? Well, I figure out what's going on here.
Let's see. What did we do today? Well, I spent some time putting together our new grill.
That's
was
a
exciting.
nice thing. That's a nice thing.
Currently, though, it's not put together. It's upside down on the garage floor. It was a really beautiful day, though, so we were able to be outside. Oh, somebody can hear him on the chat.
Oh, they hear him. Just we don't hear him?
We can't hear him.
Okay, that's odder than
I can
odd.
tell. I can tell
So-
you guys everything I want to about Jonathan, and he has no idea what I'm talking about right now.
That's
This is
good.
like an
You just
ideal
keep
setup.
talking. Microphone muted.
Oh.
I don't even know what to say about it.
I'll call back.
At least they're watching. Brian, you just talk. Uh-oh. He just went away. He went away. I was going to say, Brian, you talk. Oh, I know what happened. It's because on a call from Flammy. So when Flammy went away, it shut down the call. I bet you that's what it was. Skype is really bad.
Can you hear me now?
It is a bad program. Brian, can I hear you now? Nope.
Hear me now?
Oh, nope, that's not what it was. Oh, this is great. But they can hear him. So you just talk, Brian, and I'm gonna go until I hear you. I'm gonna keep trying to figure out what to do until I hear you.
Let's see. What can we talk about? We were talking about praying for the leader. I had a whole list of things to talk about that I made notes on. I got to pull it out of the other. And I can do it. This. I think this is important because we were talking earlier about this matter of perspective. In other words, how do we keep our opinions in the right perspective? How do we grab a hold of our thoughts and kind of keep them in proper proportion? So how can it be that I care about Jesus as much as Jesus ought to be cared about, and I care about my neighbor as much as they ought to be cared about, and I care about the Dallas Cowboys as much as they ought to be cared about? In other words, the importance of the thing is matched up to the perspective. And I think this is one of the things that gets really out of whack in politics. And the result is that idolatry, that I began to fear, love, and trust something more than God, or even this, more than it ought to be feared, which is really quite dangerous. And if the things of this world become out of proportion, this is amazing. If we love and care for the things of this world more than we ought to love.
Can't see. Just says it seems like we're on here. And hey everybody, this is really not the way it was meant to go. Oh, Hans Feeney's calling though. That'll be fun. We'll have him jump right in. Maybe you can hear us, maybe you can't. He doesn't know we all just fell apart. So, hey Hans Feeney, welcome back to the show. If he shows up.
Thanks.
Let's see. I got repeating audio. I got to get rid of here, get rid of that. That might kind of fix it. I can hear you. I cannot see you. And there you go. Welcome. We just had a whole big conflux where Wolfmuller couldn't be heard and then could be heard and then vanished and all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to see if I can get him back here in just a moment. Wolfmuller. I rebooted the whole computer. Stream was down. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Add. Does that work? There we go. Colin Bryan. Do you hear
An echo?
an echo?
A little bit.
I don't know why. That is. Oh, David Preuss is calling too. That's great. Here, he's going to hop in. Maybe. So how you been, Hans? Why don't you chat? Oh my goodness. This has been a catastrophe. It was a great first hour. We had everything working fine, and then Flammy left, and everything fell apart. Connect on their microphone. Oh my goodness. Can you guys hear me at all? I can't hear David. Hans, can you? Nope. Everything has crashed. Dear heavens, what shall we do? All right. So I think the world can hear you, but they can't hear me. I'm going to turn myself off again. And finish the broadcast.